Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So we have the case now of Sayed Salim Shahzad. And here we are in the wilderness of mirrors. Nobody knows what's what. Disappeared, found dead. And the accusation in the Washington Post is his death was payback, not from the Taliban, not from the terrorists, so-called, but from Pakistan's fearsome spy agencies, the infamous ISI, as usual, being targeted. Well, no proof, as they actually quote the spokesman for the ISI says concerning Shahzad's death, show us the proof, otherwise it's totally absurd. Yeah, it's total speculation. But here's the interesting detail on this. Shahzad was publishing in the Asia Times online. How interesting. The Asia Times, you know, where you can read Pepe Escobar, a very radical-sounding sort of, Latin American, has a certain amount of, radical leftism there, something left over of that. Or, if you want something different, you can go all the way to the right-wing fringe to Spengler, David P. Goldman, whose career has included any number of outrageous statements. We don't have time for that right now. It's not significant enough. But the Asia Times had been publishing a series of articles, or at least one or two important ones, by Shahzad, talking about the attack on the Karachi Naval Base last week. And again, remember, our coverage here was the attack on the Karachi Naval Base, the Faisal Air Force Base, is part of a strategic plan to weaken Pakistan in terms of its overall strategic capabilities, in this case by targeting those Orion anti-submarine aircraft and also by targeting the Chinese workers, holding them hostage and threatening to kill them. But Shahzad had said that the Karachi Naval Base attack was a response to the Pakistani Navy's detection of an al-Qaeda cell within its own ranks. Again, the theme of the infiltration of the Pakistani military that the Washington Post has been pushing so hysterically for the past week. And the Asia Times says it followed failed discussions between the Navy and al-Qaeda about the release of naval officers arrested on suspicion of links to the terrorist group. Boy, that's complicated. And in the middle of this, we know who's doing what to whom. This has got to do with the U.S. attack on Pakistan and, of course, the demonization of the ISI. If they're attacking the ISI, you have to remember, hey, that's the CIA line. That's the Mossad line. That's the British MI6 line. And so the Asia Times attempts to take pretty much the Western intelligence agency's view, but to somehow wrap that from time to time in some kind of a rhetoric or package that would make it more palatable, more able to penetrate, say, into China. It doesn't start with, down with the Beijing regime, but it attempts to do it in a more subtle way. So a suspicious place for somebody to be based, I would say, and I would accordingly warn people against this. But in terms of the operation, there's no doubt it's more targeting of Pakistan. So here we are. In this case, too, we're drifting towards some kind of an abyss, and we've just had along the border several hundred Taliban attacking a Pakistani checkpoint. Now, does that mean that these Taliban, if that's what they are, have made a deal with the United States and they've now taken their attacks across the border and into Pakistan? Quite possibly so. That's what we've heard. Remember, the article that's up at Tarpley.net talks about accusations from the nation of Lahore that there's a counter-gang fake Taliban run by the U.S., the Indian RAW, and the Mossad. So all of that to be taken into account. Now, the other fronts, of course, in North Africa and the Arab world. Remember, January, we had the fall of Ben Ali of Tunisia. February, the fall of Hosni Mubarak of Egypt. So at that point, the MI6 and CIA people, the color revolution makers, the people power coup artists, the golpisti, were saying, no, we're going to have one down every month, March, April, May. Well, March, April, May have gone by, and nobody's down in those months. And, of course, Gaddafi turned the tide. Gaddafi's resistance has stopped this process by, to a significant degree, exposing what it is. It is not the golden youth singing tomorrows for the entire population. It is a brutal, hideous, imperialist attack featuring terrorists in the front ranks of the wonderful pro-democracy forces, as we see in the city council of Darna, where we have Hasidi and Kumi and Barani, right, the terrorist triumvirate of Darna that are bringing the singing tomorrows of democracy. I'm sure with all kinds of atrocities and executions that the Western press does not tell you about. So for the past week or two, the entire NATO policy has been an attempt to assassinate Gaddafi, and it hasn't worked. Gaddafi quite resourceful. Now, as of today, this has been added to. There's so much concern in these CIA circles that Saleh in Yemen has been holding on. They're now attempting to kill him. This was a big attack on the presidential palace, with Saleh wounded to some extent. I think the head of the National Security Council critically wounded, and many other government officials injured in this attack. But Saleh, as far as we can see right now, on the afternoon of June 3rd, Saleh is hanging on. So that one is not going anywhere. Gaddafi is fighting back. Saleh is hanging on. And in Syria, this is also going nowhere. If you listen to the weekly review on NPR on Friday morning, they're all more or less in despair. The Syrian destabilization is going nowhere. They're all whining that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the Quds Force, has come into Syria, and they're preventing the wonderful overthrow of the Assad family, so that would allow you then also to oust the Russian naval base at Tartus and, of course, cut off the Hezbollah and deprive Iran of their only really significant ally in the region. So Libya, Yemen, Syria, ugly stuff going on, but the destabilization, to put it at the minimum level, not working. And then let's just also factor in, should have done this in the context of Pakistan, Karzai of Afghanistan is now issuing more ultimata of his own. U.S. is getting some ultimata these days. It hasn't happened that much. Karzai says to the U.S., look, you stop attacks on Afghan civilians. You must stop your attacks on civilian dwellings, or out you go. The U.S. commentators say, well, of course, he doesn't have the power to prevent NATO from doing these things. Well, maybe he does, in the sense that the political backlash and the level of mass resistance inside Afghanistan can indeed be influenced by Karzai. So he wants stop all airstrikes on Afghan homes, and this is your last warning. When you say this is the last warning, this is a little bit like an ultimatum. So we've got China issuing the ultimatum, don't attack Pakistan. We've got China issuing this warning, stop with your internet warfare, and Karzai gets into the act. This is an index of how weak the empire is. When a guy whose country is the most occupied by 100,000 or 110,000 U.S. forces plus another 100,000 contractors, mercenary killers, plus NATO, probably 250,000 total. When he tells you this is your last warning, man, you are in trouble. So that is all going on. So we will be back in a second here on World Crisis Radio.